Hi, today on Danesthesia, we're combining two things that make my blood pressure rise for completely different reasons: World Cup soccer and traumatic injuries. Now, ranking the worst World Cup injuries is tricky because worst can mean a lot of different things. It can mean the most gruesome injury, the most dangerous medically, the biggest effect on a player's career, or the moment that made every doctor watching the game yell, "What are you doing? Get him off the field!" Oh, like you don't talk to the TV during sports? Anyway, so for this list, I'm ranking these injuries based on medical severity, long-term impact, and how much the way we think about player safety has changed. And yes, as a doctor, I'll be ruining some of the magic by explaining the anatomy and talking about things in a technical way. That's just kind of what I do here. So let's go. Let's start with Michael Owen at the 2006 World Cup. England were playing Sweden, and Owen went down less than a minute into the match after twisting his right knee. He didn't get tackled, there was no flying goalkeeper or cinematic slow-motion collision, just one awkward movement and the game was over for him. That's one of the cruel things about ACL injuries. They don't always need a huge external force. Like a weird pivot, sudden deceleration, or a twist can be enough. The ACL, or anterior cruciate ligament, is one of the most important stabilizing ligaments in the knee. It helps prevent the tibia, one of the lower bones in the leg, from sliding too far forward relative to the femur, the big bone in the leg, and it helps control rotational stability too. For soccer players, that rotational control is super important. Cutting, turning, sprinting, stopping, and changing direction all depend on a stable knee. Anyway, an imaging scan confirmed that Owen had ruptured his ACL, and he was sent home from the tournament. From a medical standpoint, an ACL tear isn't life-threatening, but for an elite athlete, it can be career-ending. Even with modern surgery and rehab, return to play at the top level of sports isn't guaranteed at all. The player has to rebuild strength, coordination, confidence, and the ability to trust the knee again under the same crazy conditions that caused the injury in the first place. The surgery is only the beginning of the long trail to recovery. The real battle is months of rehabilitation, swelling control, quadriceps strengthening, hamstring work, proprioception training, and eventually sport-specific movement. Michael Owen later said that many of the injuries he dealt with afterward traced back to that 2006 World Cup injury. And that's why it makes the list. It wasn't the bloodiest injury, but it was a turning point in the career of one of England's most explosive forwards. Next we go back to 1966, when Pelé entered the World Cup as the biggest football star in the world. Brazil were the defending champions, and Pelé was already a global icon. But the tournament became infamous for the physical treatment he endured. He was injured against Bulgaria, then returned later in the tournament against Portugal, where he was fouled repeatedly. By the end, he was limping badly, and Brazil were eliminated in the group stage. So this is not one single clean diagnosis like an ACL rupture. This is more of a cumulative trauma story. Repeated kicks to the legs can cause contusions, muscle injuries, ankle sprains, knee trauma, and deep soft tissue damage. In the modern game, we know that bringing players back too soon increases the risk of making the injury worse. So there's much more emphasis on player protection and preventing repeated injuries. In 1966, the attitude was much closer to, "Can you stand? Great, keep playing." And that's kind of crazy from a medical standpoint. When an athlete's already injured, their mechanics change. They limp, they compensate, and they put extra stress on other joints. A painful ankle can change the way the knee absorbs force. A bruised thigh can change the mechanics of running and sprinting. A player who can't move normally is also less able to protect themselves from the next challenge. People still remember the 1966 World Cup because it showed that even a superstar like Pelé was vulnerable when players weren't properly protected on the field. This injury belongs on the list because of its historical impact. It wasn't just Pelé getting hurt. It was soccer being forced to confront the idea that players need protection, not punishment. Now we get to one of the most uncomfortable entries on the list. In the 2014 World Cup, Uruguay were playing England when Álvaro Pereira took a knee to the head from Raheem Sterling. Pereira went down and appeared to lose consciousness, but then, incredibly, he just got up and continued playing the game. From a doctor's perspective, This is the kind of thing that makes your soul leave your body. A concussion is a traumatic brain injury. It doesn't require loss of consciousness, but if it happens, even briefly, that's a huge red flag. The brain is soft tissue floating inside a rigid skull. When the head is struck, the brain can move rapidly, stretch nerve fibers, and trigger a cascade of dysfunction. Symptoms can include confusion, dizziness, headache, nausea, memory problems, balance issues, and delayed reaction time. Now imagine having all of those symptoms while trying to play elite-level soccer in front of millions of fans, desperate for your team to win. That is exactly why concussion protocols just can't depend on the athlete making the decision. Athletes are competitive. They minimize symptoms because they want to stay in the game. Their adrenaline is high, but their judgment is impaired by the injury that we're trying to assess. Pereira later described the incident as feeling like the lights went out. That specific phrase should make every sideline medical team think really hard. The reason this injury ranks so high is not because it looked the most violent, it's because the decision to let him continue playing became a major example of why soccer needed better concussion protocols. In orthopedics, a bad knee can end a sports career, but in neurology, a mishandled concussion can affect the rest of a person's whole life. At number 2, we have Neymar da Silva Santos.
Neymar Jr., everybody.
In the 2014 World Cup quarterfinal between Brazil and Colombia. Late in the match, Juan Camilo Zúñiga drove his knee into Neymar's lower back. Neymar collapsed, was carried off, and was later diagnosed with a fracture of the third lumbar vertebra. This was a huge moment for the tournament. Neymar was Brazil's superstar. Brazil were hosting the World Cup, and suddenly their most important attacker was out. The lumbar spine is in the lower back. It carries a lot of body weight, absorbs force, and protects nerve structures that travel down toward the legs. The third lumbar vertebrae, or L3, sits right in that lower back region. A vertebral fracture sounds terrifying because people immediately think about paralysis. That's a completely rational fear, but the risk depends a lot on the exact part of the bone that's fractured, whether the spinal canal is pinched or punctured, whether the fracture is stable, and whether or not there are neurological symptoms. Reports at the time described Neymar's injury as not requiring surgery, but needing immobilization and recovery. That is good news, but good news in this context still means a fractured spine. Now, brain and spinal injuries immediately get my attention. When we care for trauma patients, we think about spine precautions, neurologic exams, pain control, airway management, and whether there are associated injuries. Until you can prove otherwise, a patient with a spine injury is not just having back pain. The scary part about Neymar's injury is how close it was to being much worse. He later said that he was told that if the impact had been slightly different, the outcome could have been devastating. This injury ranks so high because it involved the spine, ended the tournament for one of the biggest players in the world, and changed the arc of the entire World Cup. Brazil continued into the semi-final without Neymar, but lost to Germany 7-1, which is still one of the most shocking results in World Cup history. Alright, at number 1 we have Patrick Battiston in the 1982 World Cup semi-final between France and West Germany. This is one of the most famous collisions in World Cup history. Battiston had just come on as a substitute. He chased a passed ball, got up to it, and took aim at the goal. At the same time, West German goalkeeper Harald Schumacher came flying out to try and block his shot. And that's when Schumacher's body collided with Battiston's head. It was so violent that he suffered broken ribs, lost teeth, and was instantly knocked unconscious. Medics gave him oxygen and he was taken off the field. But somehow, Schumacher didn't even get a yellow card. From a medical standpoint, this is about as bad as it gets. Several serious injuries happened at the same time. First, there's the head injury. Anytime someone loses consciousness after a high-speed collision, that should raise immediate concern for concussion, bleeding in the brain, injuries to the neck, and damage to the airway causing breathing problems. Second, there was major facial trauma. Losing a couple of teeth isn't just a beauty issue. Broken teeth can become airway foreign bodies, and blood pooling in the mouth not only makes it harder to breathe, but if we have to place a breathing tube, it makes it harder for us to see what we're doing in there. Third, there was chest trauma. Broken ribs are extremely painful, and that pain often keeps people from taking deep breaths. Over time, those areas of the lungs that aren't fully expanding become high risk for infection and pneumonia. In severe chest trauma, we also worry about lungs bruising or even collapsing, which, as you can imagine, is an emergency situation and requires placing a chest tube. Fourth, there was the reported back injury. And like I said before, anytime you combine loss of consciousness with possible spine trauma, you need to assume the spine is injured until proven otherwise. This injury comes in at number 1 because it checks almost every box. It was violent, it was medically dangerous, it involved the head, face, chest, and back. It occurred on the biggest stage in the world, and the fact that Schumacher didn't even get a yellow card made the whole thing even more shocking. But it's also a reminder of how far sports medicine has come. Today, a collision like that would trigger immediate emergency evaluation, concussion assessment, probably an X-ray or even CT scans, airway vigilance, and it would raise serious questions about whether the player responsible should have been ejected from the game. In 1982, they just restarted play with a goal kick. That's freaking crazy. When you look at these 5 injuries together, you can see the evolution of sports medicine. Pelé's injuries happened in an era where even star players were barely protected. Battiston's collision shows how dangerous head and facial trauma can be. Owen's ACL tear shows how a single ligament injury can reshape an athlete's entire career. Pereira's concussion shows why injured athletes shouldn't be the ones deciding if they should keep playing or if they should be going to the hospital. And Neymar's spinal fracture shows how close a dramatic moment in sports can come to being a serious catastrophe. The World Cup is beautiful because players are willing to push their bodies to the limit. But medicine exists because bodies have limits, even when the crowd is screaming and the stakes are massive. So the next time a player goes down and the medical team rushes onto the field, remember that they're not trying to slow the game down. They want to watch their team win just like everyone else. All they're doing is trying to protect a human being whose entire future might depend on the kind of care they receive over the next 5 minutes. That's it for today's episode of Danesthesia. Like and subscribe if you enjoy sports medicine breakdowns, anesthesia perspectives, and the occasional reminder that the human body is both amazing and suspiciously poorly designed for professional soccer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.